Good.
Yeah.
Okay, I can share my screen. So, okay. Good afternoon to everyone. I want to start this introduction about our special issue with some words brought by Hippocrates 2,500 years ago. He, in his treatise on airs, waters, and place, had emphasized the influence of the physical environment on human health. If you want to learn about the health of a population, look at the air they breathe, the water they drink, and the place where they live. So I bring some information coming from the last papers published about our society by Brian Davis last year, a very brief history about the society, only for introduce this meeting, and is interesting for me, and I suppose even for us, that remember that the society was born in Dallas, Texas, at the end of December 1968, at a symposium on environmental geochemistry and health and disease. And you can see on the right, the first paper, the symposium abstract published by Science on the right. After that, the first information coming from the society, you can have some information coming from the society starting from the 1969 and the meeting 1917. The name of Society for Environmental Geochemistry Health was approved, and Delbert Henfield was elected as the fifth president. You can see the Environmental Geochemistry, the first book in which the society was mentioned and start his activity. After that, I bring some information coming from the medical geology. I think this is interesting because you can see in the table 3 on the right, on the left, the educational professional resource in medical geology. You can see that Environmental Geochemistry Health, our journal that publish many information about environmental geochemistry and health, is mentioned as one of the very important resource for medical geology. And you can see that many of the society member of the Society of the Environmental Geochemistry and Health, coming from, first of all, United States National Research Academy, when start the society coming from the United States, but with the subcommittee coming from the National Research Academy and the geochemical environment in relation to health and disease. These two subcommittees published 3 reports on geochemistry and the environment in 1972, 1973, and 1974. It may be stated that the contribution made by the scientists associated with these 2 organizations coming from USA was shared with others in Europe. Brian Davis, we have now today a brief by Brian Davis about the importance of the society and the development of the society, I suppose, some ideas. Brian Davis was one of the pioneers of the European section coming from the 1918. In Asia Pacific, we have Xiandong Li with help of Ian Thornton and Ron Fogg that made a proposal for the Asia Pacific section at the end of the last century, and now we have many colleagues coming from the Africa. All of these colleagues provided the stimulus and set of the course for modern medical geology. So from my side, for very interesting to resume this information for understand what is the Society of Environmental Geochemistry and Health and what can this society give to the community and in particular to the scientific and professional community. We can start to present our meeting. coming from the celebrating of the 15 years of the Society of Environmental Geochemistry Health. This special issue comprises 11 papers that are the latest advanced of the Society of Environmental Geochemistry Health. They represent the status of the art of the collaboration between earth and health science. The success of this society and the future for development provide authoritative horizon scanning of key pressing, emerging and persistent issues relevant to our communities. Environmental geochemistry is concerned with the source, distribution, interaction of chemical elements in rocks, soil, water, air, life, and health system. In this special issue, we present the study of the geochemical behavior of potential harmful elements in different environments. The surface environment closest to man has dominant importance. The mobility and speciation of chemical elements are central to many feedbacks that connect geochemical, biological, and geological processes of Earth's surface. In this special issue, we invited submission exploring the latest advanced study proposed by the board member team of the society. Special attention was made to the early career research that represents students and undergraduate and postgraduate and philosophy doctor that represent the future of the society. Society also operate as a mentor. The topics covered during this within this special issue are an overview of the role of the Society for Environmental Geochemistry Health by Brian Davis, and a brief introduction about the climate change, the relationship with groundwater quality, and the relationship with health problems related by myself. Then we have a discussion about the contaminants, health in Lavrion urban area coming from the Greek contribution. We have two contributions about this thematic. Then we have emerging contaminants and geochemical cycle by Andy Candy, protracted crisis, displacement, environmental risk by Andrew Arthaus, geochemistry and animal behavior and health by Fiona Sachs, the use of isotopes methodologies for tracks environmental change by Michael Box, I suppose, spatial analysis, environmental geochemistry, and big data era by Johnson Zhang. At the end of the meeting, we have to share the opportunity to share the baton of the post of president of the society to Professor Akinade Olakuni, providing an opportunity to the handover, but also for the society members to ask questions on the society board or pose a suggestion for future developments. Only to conclude, a special gratitude and appreciation is extended to the other specialists coordinating West Editor, Mark Button, Andrew Orthaus, and Motats, and to all the authors for the high quality submission and the anonymous reviewers for vulturing their time and expertise to evaluate the scientific merit of the submitted papers. Additional, the editor-in-chief, Prof. Ming Wong of Environmental Geochemistry and Health, that is the official journal of the society, deserves special thanks for his great effort and support in making this special issue. We hope that this special issue can highlight new contribution in the rapidly growing and exciting interdisciplinary field of environmental geochemistry and health. If Brian Davis, okay, I can stop my sharing, and if Brian Davis can start his presentation, please.
Didn't know I was on mute. How are we doing?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what is written is written. I didn't want to go over what we already wrote down. There was no point. Everybody can read that, has read it. I thought I'd just be a little philosophical and try and set the scene of here we are 50 years later, for me, 60 years later, interested in this. The scene was already set when the society came into being, because there was already a growing interest. Back in 1935, Eric Underwood had shown cobalt to be an essential nutrient. He was a vet in Australia. Later, 1960, Walter Mertz, the only MD amongst us, showed chromium to be essential. Along the way, André Voisin, who was a vet and also a farmer, wrote his celebrated book, which is still worth reading, Soil, Grass and Cancer. There have been a number of atlas maps showing that diseases like cancer were very unequally distributed across any country. So SEGH came into being, and it's very interesting that those who were the progenitors of this were all somehow concerned with the soil, plant, animal continuum. Delbert Hemphill in Colombia, then two celebrated geologists, Helen Cannon, Harry Warren, looking at the uptake of metals in plants for geochemical, for prospecting. My own journey into this was somewhat similar. My degree had been a joint degree in biochemistry and soil science, and my PhD topic was potassium and magnesium, because there was a lot of interest at the time in a disease called grass tetany, grass staggers, a serious imbalance of potassium and magnesium in nutrition, leading to sudden death of animals. So when Harry Warren wrote to me, I knew him already in the fall of 1970, and said, hey, we got this society, do you want to join us? And hey, yes, where do I send my check? Well, we've come a long way from then, with various waymarks along the way, and I will say one of the main waymarks when we all, as it were, came of age, when Ian, along with Stan Bowie, organised the Royal Society Working Party back in 1979, and followed that up with conferences in London and many other conferences we have all contributed to right up to the present. So for me, it's not merely 50 years from the Society's beginning, it's sort of 60 years since I began my interest, when I took my first soil samples out in the wilds of Denbighshire, went home back to Milan and analysed them. So 60 years on, obviously I have reflections on what should be happening, where we're going, and I fully approve. I think the efforts that are being made are wonderful, and congratulations to everybody for their hard work. I still have some questions to pose, however, and I'll try and be brief because time is going on. We call ourselves Environmental Geochemistry Health. Are we yet a science, or are we still in the natural history part of this? I say this because you obviously have to start with loads of case studies and data, but a science must be predictive. At the end of the day, people are going to say, well, if you do A, will B happen? And I'm not sure we've got there yet. We had a good shot when we produced the Working Party, which has been since republished, on lead in soil with a computer program, feeding your lead level and all sorts of other parameters will tell you when it was bad for kids. I think we need more of that kind of modeling, very seriously. We need that sort of statistical computer modeling to underpin risk analysis. We need another kind of modeling, and one of the disappointments all along is we rarely in conferences have any what I would say chemical, geochemical papers, not just simply analysis depending on and saying what kind of rocks, but more than that, because we need to understand process. I got very near that right at the end of my career, working with Samira Kafali in Lebanon, looking at the fate of lead introduced into a calcareous river, the Nahr Ibrahim, and we looked at the partitioning of pollutants in the bed sediments, and also used MinTech to studied the speciation in the water column. And I think we need more of that sort of study reported. What is actually going on in process? We need to do other things as well. As a society, I think we should be in a position to advise on what are reference levels, not simply numbers plucked out, but reference levels for metals in, say, soils or sediments, because they will vary according to continent. The deeply weathered soils of the African savannas are going to have different reference levels than the young soils of recent glaciated areas like Britain. And then finally, I do think we need to revisit some of the old elements we've been looking at. I know we're swamped by the contaminants. Hey, that's where the money is coming from. You can't do research if you don't have the money. It's as simple as that. But I published that paper on magnesium in the journal, largely because I was just getting over a long period of that disastrous problem of atrial fibrillation. And doctors are there to cure you, not to educate you. And I had remembered my magnesium work 6 years before and looked into it. And I now know there is a very strong growing medical interest in magnesium. Every now and again, I get somebody contacting me and say, well, I contribute a paper. I say, hey, no, I'm retired, long since gone. So I think we need to go back to some of those elements and think about them again. Magnesium, selenium. We have done quite a bit on iodine, and enlarge out from our preoccupation with the toxic metal. So what I'm suggesting to finish off then is, let's try and understand process, and let's broaden out to elements which are less fashionable. So thank you, Maurizio.
Many thanks. It's very interesting to understand and to hear these words coming from a very interesting scientist like you. Okay, we can move to the next presentation that is by myself about another thematic interesting for our meeting. Okay. I present my results coming from the manuscript published under this special issue. And it's about climate change and its effect on groundwater quality. Why this thematic? Because knowing water quality at large scale and related ground and surface water interaction impacted by land use and the climate is essential to our future protection and restoration investment. Population growth has driven humankind into the Anthropocene, where continuous water quality degradation is a global phenomenon. Notwithstanding the increasing consent in climate change and water security, research linking climate change and groundwater quality remain early. In this scenario, the role of the society is to work together within and across geochemical environments linked with the health of plants, animals, and humans to respond of multiple challenges and opportunities made by the global warming. To verify the hypothesis of significant change in groundwater chemistry, we select an area coming from the Mediterranean region that is one of the region coming from an area very stressed by the climate variability during the last 20 years. And we select in particular a fractured regional aquifer in central Italy, coming from carbonate rocks, because carbonate rocks are present in all continents and karst regions around the planet and most diverse hydrogeological environments. This paper performed a preliminary steps showing the change in dissolved ions over a time of 20 years in 3 main springs on the eastern side of the Sibillini aquifer in central Italy. You can see some slides and picture in the upper part of the slides. And the particularity of this area is that is located in central Italy, and that area is partially collected for drinking purpose and served about 400 citizens. However, it is notable that some ions show particular trend a spike. Indeed, in the sulfate, you can see concentration on the right of the slides, a progressive increase of about 5 milligrams per liter from 2070 to 2020 for 2 springs measured under monitoring, and reflect the decreased trend identified in the snowfall, which is the primary recharge factor of the spring. This case study, okay, in addition, we have all, even the analysis of trace elements, even only for 2 years, but highlights the relationship between some ions concentration and the hydrogeological recharge discussed cycle. In the proposed case study, the increase of strontium-barium ratio are potentially related to recharge periods, and that induce change in the pressure field of the aquifer. Therefore, we argue that a more extended time is necessary to have, but this change in groundwater chemistry can refer to measured ions and some metals and metalloids affecting water quality, with the main consequence being the hardness of the water. In this scenario, variation in recharge dynamics induced by climate change can practically alter the groundwater quality and therefore represent a potential risk for human health. This case study confirmed that groundwater compared to surface water is more resilient to climate change. Nevertheless, climate change can affect groundwater quality by reducing aquifer recharge and increasing anthropogenic pressure. Some epidemiological investigations have displayed, as remembered by Brian Davis last minute ago, but it's interesting to stress about these specific characteristics. Both climate change and groundwater quality must consider to be of increasing because of their relevance to the water world supply. It is important to remember that this thematic fit very well with at least 3 goals of the United Nations Strategy Development Goals, the Goal 3, Good and Health and Well-being, Goal 6, Clean Water and Sanitation, and Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. In this scenario, I suppose that this new water quality challenge draws the society members working together to promote and develop effective technology and policy responses to mitigate and adapt to climate change impacts on water quality, and to share answer, best practice, and lesson learned on climate change impacts in water quality to support the education and social awareness, and subsequently in increasing human health relationship, especially in development countries. Thanks for presentation. You can see some picture coming from the carbonate rocks in central Italy and the system of water to adduction. Okay. We can move to the next presentation. I suppose Zaccaria Kiprotidou is online to present the first part of the Do Human Take Good Care of the Offsprings of Animal Do.
Okay, may I share my screen?
Okay, thanks.
my share screen is disabled, so I'm not allowed to share my screen, so
You should be able to now. I've just enabled all participants to share their screens.
Yes.
So please try again.
Okay, thank you very much. All right.
Okay.
So in our review paper regarding Lavreotiki contamination problem, we divided in two parts. The first one dealing with the historical outline and mapping of lead contamination, whilst the second part deals with the proposed rehabilitation scheme. Lavrion is a famous center for the mineralization, for the exploitation of massive sulfide mineralization for more than 5,000 years. And the exploitation and any ore beneficiation activity ceased in 1980s. And the following decade, a series of mapping of contamination geochemical research were conducted with the aim of proposed rehabilitation. The problem with Lavrion area is that the 1,000-year-long mining and smelting activities resulted in the accumulation of mining and ore beneficiation waste throughout Lavrion area and suburban area. And you see that many of the habitants' houses and activities are located within the wastes of the town. These wastes are eroded and the fine particle material is transported with the wind throughout the whole area. So the residual soil is highly contaminated with lead in respect to the host rocks. So you see that there are elevated lead concentrations, especially where the peritiferous sand and hypes are located. Moreover, the fine grain material entered also the houses of the residents, and this was seen by elevated lead concentrations in road and house dusts. And moreover, the leachates coming from the mining piles infiltrate the groundwater, enriching it and resulting in high phytotoxicity as measured in lead concentration in grapes and vines that grow in the area and are intended for local consumption. Consequently, the final receptor of lead is none else but the local population, and especially the primary school-age children, where elevated blood levels were found for lead and the deciduous teeth. These geochemical investigations led to the proposition of the hazard and risk assessment and the proposed remediation scheme. So the contamination of the wider area was estimated by calculating contamination indexes in the overburden in respect to Lavrion site-specific residential soil action levels, where you see highly contaminated areas are located where the pyrite and peritiferous sands is located, showing that the whole area is contaminated more than 1,000 times. Moreover, hazard and exposure indices were also calculated in respect to the dustiness of the wastes, their proximity to the houses and the land uses, and emphasis was given mainly to the exposure of young children, which spend most of their time outdoors in schoolyards and parks. The results showed that the area was under increased hazard and exposure. And this led to the proposed rehabilitation scheme, which took into account the different land uses, the cost of different rehabilitation methods, as well as the total benefit of the locals from this remediation scheme. And different remediation methods were proposed based on these indexes. The result of this study was that it was the first multi-compartment sampling environmental geochemistry project in Hellas. It was very pioneering at that time, and that's the main reason why it was not implemented, because the local population was not ready to follow the instructions given by the experts. However, the collaboration of geochemists and health practitioners in evaluating the health and environmental hazards of the Lavrion urban and suburban area was decisive. And since then, many attempts have been made, and some spaces in Lavrion have been restored. And we hope that in the future, the Lavrion area would be rehabilitated. So the role of SEGH at that time was decisive in mapping the environmental contamination in Lavrion urban and suburban area. When the former president, Ian Thornton, was invited and saw the conditions in Lavrion. And what we can say is that SEGH can act as the link between environmentalists and the public in order to communicate the health hazards imposed by a contaminated environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zaccaria, for the presentation. Then we can move to Vivika Kurja for the next presentation about the second part of this research by the Greek colleagues.
I just presented the second part also because Ms. Kouria is absent.
Okay.
So we may move on the third presentation. Oh.
I don't understand. We waiting for your colleagues, or?
No, I presented also Ms. Kouria's presentation because she's absent. So we may move on to the third one.
Okay. Excuse me. Andy Kundi, please, you can start your presentation about all the new contaminants.
Good afternoon, all. Thanks, Maurizio. I'll just try and share my screen. Hopefully this works okay. Bear with me. Okay, if I go to presentation mode.
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, thank you. Is that in presentation mode or is that in a presenter mode? I've had this problem before.
That's in presenter mode.
Right, I'll see if I can Is that okay now?
No, it's a blank screen, Andy.
Oh, sorry. I'll stop sharing and going again. Sorry, I'm more used to Teams than Zoom. My apologies. The joys of Right. Okay. Can we see that?
Yes. Maybe
yeah,
okay. On that.
Right. I'll leave it on that. I'll play it safe. Okay. So first of all, thanks Maurizio and the other guest editors for coordinating the special issue and also for coordinating this event. It's great to see everybody online. Okay, so I'd like to briefly present a summary of our contribution to the special issue, which is on old and new contaminants and their management, how we can learn from the past to look to the future. Okay, so the paper itself, hopefully that slide's advanced, is co-authored by myself, Gillian and Alex, who are online, so can jump in if I've made any mistakes or misrepresent them in any way, and Swana. So basically, this particular paper looks at the past 50 years. So within the time scale or the lifetime of the Society for Environmental Geochemistry and Health, we've seen a number of supposed wonder chemicals become contaminants of concern. And that's really true for a variety of currently emerging contaminants. So these are often organic contaminants that are not routinely monitored, but which we know are ubiquitous in the environment and can cause toxic impacts, ecosystem effects, even at the sub-ppb down to the parts per trillion level. So there's a range of these that have formed a large focus of interest in the scientific community and health community over the past few years, things like plastic microbeads, pharmaceutical residues, fire retardant chemicals, etc. So in the paper, we discuss the risk associated with a range of these emerging contaminants. So their global nature, the fact that they are found throughout the world, often at low concentrations, but they're globally ubiquitous, and they're also found in biological systems, including in very widely in humans. We talked also about how you can apply existing models and frameworks to deal with impacts, which I'll come back to in a second, outlined some of the research and management gaps, and also some of the challenges regarding the effective risk management of these emerging contaminants. So the first part of the paper examined the journey to now, and here we examined the importance really of global protection and cooperation, the frameworks provided by UN conventions and also legislation such as the REACH legislation. The role of existing risk management frameworks such as the source, pathway, receptor risk management concept used extensively in contaminated land, to look at monitoring and modeling of pollutant migration to provide a framework for that. We also presented 3 case studies on plastics and their potential impact as a globally ubiquitous and increasing contaminant. Diclofenac, which is an emerging contaminant, and we looked at that in terms of its impact on avian systems, bird systems, and then also antimicrobial resistance and its potential link with geochemistry, with metal chemistry. We also examined the wider environmental impact and consideration and management of risk, and really the need for a coordinated and life cycle approach to the protection of human health. And I'm sure Andrew Hurstass will kind of build on those ideas in his presentation that's next. So in terms of future actions and cooperation, we argued that, of course, people are at the center of their own lives, but as shown by that onion skin model there on the right-hand side of the slide, wider environmental and social conditions influence health. Often people have little personal control over that. And there's a real need for longitudinal and multidisciplinary studies to deal with some of the complexities shown in that onion skin model. So in terms of the future look, synergies and trade-offs, obviously, we're considering here a shift from fossil fuel use globally as we move towards lower carbon or more renewable energies, including electric vehicles, and that will see the emergence of new airborne contaminants. Also, there are issues around indoor versus outdoor air pollution. Obviously, during the pandemic, a number of people were spending more time indoors, as many of us are now, and obviously that exposes us to a range of different indoor pollutants, airborne pollutants. And also, we argued for a need for a coordinated approach to control emissions, okay, to tackle sources, but also to tackle the receptor or the endpoints, global responsibility for end-of-life action on waste. And the key concluding thoughts and take-home messages from the paper were that the source pathway receptor approach for risk assessment and risk management effectively crosses time and space, as well as close proximity and immediacy. There are obviously developing One Health and All Hazards approaches that could be important in integrated management of risk. And also the global sustainability agenda and post-COVID recovery offers opportunities and challenges around managing the health risks of air, soil, sediment and water pollution, and also reducing global inequalities in exposure to contaminants. And there's a real need to provide accessible technologies, methods and data to monitor contaminants, both old, established, more frequently monitored contaminants and these new contaminants, effectively both in higher income countries and in low and middle income countries. And there's a clear need to link across disciplines, obviously, as SEGH has been doing for the last 50 years, to inform policy, regulation and practice, and support evidence-based, holistic and integrated risk and response approaches. Okay, so I'll leave it there. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for this very interesting general overview of the new contaminants. We can move to Andrew Arthaus with his presentation about the waste ban in China. What happened next? Please, Andrew.
Thanks a lot, Maurizio. And Andy, what was I meant to do? Linking to you?
End of life cycle waste management. I thought that might segue smoothly into your presentation.
Okay.
As opposed to tripping me up. Right.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Sorry. Thanks a lot, Andy, and thanks, Maurizio. And hello, everyone. It's really great to see faces and also pictures and blank screens, just to see everybody joining in today. I've missed you all. And I'm sure we've missed each other and the opportunity to get together. And this is great to be able to celebrate, even virtually, the stunning achievements of the society. So just in terms of getting on to the story that I'm here to talk about, and this really is a story from Na Song, who's still in China, trying to get back to UWS in Scotland, and during her time in China during the pandemic, we had the opportunity to reflect, sharing information remotely and trying to extract information from a very turbulent environment about some of the impacts of changes in policy that affect some of the challenges that SEGH has been associated with. And we thought in terms of a step back and a look forward into the future, perhaps bringing some of the experience or the learning from being in amongst this process and these events. And it all centers around the very forceful implementation of a policy strategy within China, the banning of the import of waste from overseas, and looking at the ripple effect and the repercussions from within China, and thinking more widely externally. A lot of the work that many SEGH members have been involved with have been around the exposure of humans to waste materials in the right or the wrong places, and looking at management strategies. So in terms of informing our fundamental scientific research, the impact of policy and the link to policy is critical and will continue to be critical. And it was nice to hear from Andy about the issues of One Health. The most important emerging issue in terms of antimicrobial resistance, which has very poorly understood links to wider environment, in particular, as Andy pointed out, metals and other contaminants, which we're just starting to unpick. But this steps back to the waste ban in China, and again, the contribution from Na Song. And I'm just getting the wonderful opportunity to tell a little bit about it and some of the thoughts that would come from that process. And I'll try and do it in a couple of minutes. So in 2017, the Chinese government implemented a ban on the import of waste from outside the country to try to address some of the critical issues of poor management within the sector, exposure of large communities of individuals associated with waste management processes, poor practice in terms of handling specific types of waste, such as waste electrical equipment and recovery of raw materials. And the impact has far wider repercussions for those industries associated with continued processing of the materials for many decades. And also the challenge that it had on the very pressured landfill sector within the country, the dynamics of domestic policies that followed on to try to rapidly build up a more robust management process within an incredibly complex and very large sector. So again, this is the tugboat trying to turn the tanker around on its heel, if you like. The impact was immediate, as one would expect, on the imports to the country. And here we've got some data gathered from some of the national statistics showing quite a rapid decrease in very important imports in terms of fueling the economic activity within the country. But I think more importantly, the repercussions were more widespread. And as you look globally, this is just an example of the UK's export of plastic waste, and the light blue at the bottom is export to China, which was turned off. And then the result being that that export was either held within the country or diverted elsewhere. And you can see the repercussions meant that were that the exports were diverted to other countries around the world. And that generated quite a bit of concern, particularly in countries in close to China, certainly from the press that we reviewed, that there were concerns about why us? Why should we take on the waste from Western Europe? And so countries close to China looking at implementing bans themselves, while other countries received quite willingly those waste, those quantities of waste. And as you might expect with the waste management sector, everything is not as pure and clean as it should be, and it even captured some pretty poor practice from the UK. And Biffa, one of our largest waste management companies, was caught smuggling unwanted waste, which shows how poor the infrastructure in the UK is for some of these materials. And more widely within China, the wider impact of banning and inhibiting the waste management sector resulted in landfill space filling up very rapidly, poor landfilling practices resulting in disasters in terms of landslides, and that having direct impact on communities closely associated with those locations. Injury and death as a result of direct events, but also the more widespread and quite familiar, I think, for many countries around the globe in terms of perhaps the COVID issue, and that is the sort of fly tipping and illegal dumping of wastes and collection of wastes. And so the sort of intention of the legislation having a knock-on negative effect to the wider community, and therefore exposure to potentially harmful substances. And then as we were able to gather that information, some thoughts on perhaps how the pandemic has impacted on the waste sector. And apologies for the scatter and the unclear sort of patterns, but looking generally in terms of the analysis of data from one particular small, relatively small southern city in China, the pre-pandemic pattern of municipal waste generation shows quite a bit of scatter, and quite a lot of that scatter associated with particular periods in the year, and that links fairly closely to holiday periods where communities move around and individuals move around. But the blue line at the top is the 2020 data set, which shows remarkable sort of smoothing of trends within that very big dip in early February when the pandemic ban on movement was implemented in China, and then a slow general build as people remained within the city and were unable to travel, and therefore waste accumulated and was generated within the sector. So I guess the lesson from that is very much about the improvement and the desire for the improvement in management processes has unintended consequences elsewhere, and we should always recognize that. And I think we've seen that with other regulatory regimes being introduced into different parts of the world. So understanding that system as Earth system scientists, it shouldn't be too difficult for many environmental scientists to appreciate that. But if you're thinking of the system as a series of regulatory interventions, then that causes unintended consequences elsewhere. The management systems that are in place then are disrupted, and there are impacts on local communities that can be quite significant. And certainly the wider repercussions are slightly smothered by the impact of the pandemic, but certainly looking at the wider social and economic impacts of those interventions is still something that urgently is needed, particularly if we are to look at the other big questions that have already been mentioned today. And then I would like to, I think on behalf of my co-authors, particularly those from China, to wish you an early happy Chinese New Year of the Tiger for next week. And thank you very much for your attention, your participation, and for 50 years of wonderful academic pursuit.
Thank you very much, Andy. That was good.
Thanks, Andrew. Very interesting, even for the pandemic impact for the future. Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd really like to thank one of our co-authors. Data is difficult.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks. Fiona Sachs, please, with method development to characterize elephant ear by ICP laser ablation. Okay, you can start. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can all see my screen all right. So I'm presenting some work today that was just a chapter of my PhD and was some of the method development of my PhD. My PhD was looking at how mineral provision influences elephant movement, and I used a case study situation in Southern Africa around the Palabora copper mine, which is the largest copper and phosphate mine in Southern Africa, open pit copper and phosphate mine. And the situation at the mine is there's considerable human-elephant conflict. The elephants are spending a disproportionate amount of time around the mine site, have significantly reduced home ranges, indicating their resource needs are being met from quite a small area. And I was really looking at the drivers for their movement and possible sort of indicators of why this behavior was occurring. So this work today is a very small part of it, but it was really looking to establish mineral status down an elephant tail hair over a sort of 12 to 18 month time period using single elephant tail hairs and using a variety of techniques, so laser ablation and ICP-MS. And elephant tail hair is a reliable indicator of mineral status in elephants. And given the growth rate of a typical wild elephant tail hair, which is reasonably well reported, we can use that to sort of indicate the mineral status and the potentially toxic element status over a 12 to 18 month period. So what I did, three analytical techniques. So I used scanning electron microscopy to visualize the elephant tail hair cross-sectionally. This is something that hasn't really been done before. And it was really just to see if a tail hair has a sort of typical structure of a mammalian hair and to see what we're kind of looking at. Then I did laser ablation, and that was to determine geochemical patterns down the hair and to look from the base of the tail hair to the tip of the tail hair. And the real advantage of using this technique is that it's completely non-destructive. So that same hair could then be used for ICP-MS analysis to do a full elemental breakdown and profile of it. So I then used that same hair, sectioned it for ICP-MS. We have to section the hairs at about 3 centimeters so that you have adequate mass to conduct ICP-MS analysis. And so that same hair could be used for that next technique, which was really important. And so really, why is this important? And this is really important because human-elephant conflict is a global problem and it's a key threat to the survival of the species. It affects the most vulnerable and marginalized communities in the world, both Africa and Asia. Numerous examples of awful situations of people losing lives, being injured, losing crops, grain stores, houses, etc. It's a really, really significant issue. And as the human population rises and there's global intensification of agriculture, elephants are forced into smaller and more fragmented habitats. Their movement choices are limited and they come into increasing contact with humans. So when elephant habitat and human habitat overlaps, conflicts occur. And the conflicts result in, the most horrendous devastation and destruction. Products of agriculture are destroyed in industry, and it causes horrendous loss of human and elephant life. And we have to remember that elephant movement is never random, and elephants will move in such a way, and the drivers for their movement will be to meet their resource needs. So having non-invasive methods like this to understand the mineral status and therefore potentially indicate drivers for movement can be really, really important. And we also have to consider the impacts of climate change and how this could affect elephant movement into the future and how that's really, really important. So this picture here just shows the scanning electron microscopy images, and this is a cross section across a single elephant tail hair. So it's a slice through a tail hair. And you can see that, the tail hair is pretty uniform in most of the key elements I looked at. But what was interesting is there is this kind of crusting around the edge of the tail hair. So this was particularly important to make sure that we ran the laser to include that crusting, but to not, for example, include these sort of air-filled holes and pockets in the hair, so that you're getting really good data as you go down the hair. So these images just helped us visualize the structure of the hair, which was really important for the next step. And then this just shows sort of a kind of accumulation of 2 elephant tail hairs. And the blue lines here indicate where I sectioned the hairs for ICP-MS, and the solid lines, the ICP-MS data, and the dashed lines is the laser data. But you can see we know the time that the elephant tail hair was taken from the elephant. So these are all collared elephants that are knocked out to be collared. So the hair is sampled at a specific time. And by taking that average growth rate, you can work back and see, compared to the wet and the dry season, you can see how the mineral status of that hair changes down the hair and over time. So it is a really nice technique to combine these various analytical methods to really show that change over time and indicate potential movement. So I'd like to thank Sam Parks, South African National Parks, who provided a lot of these tail hairs, and Elephants Alive, who provided again a lot of hairs and the collared data from the elephants, and a lot of the UK zoos who provided the elephant tail hairs, which I used to develop these methods, and the British Geological Survey and all associated colleagues who assisted with the analysis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fiona. Very interesting, especially for the innovation of the approach of the geochemistry and health in animals. Okay, Michael, with the development in other isotope methodologies, you can present, or Hunter present this?
Fiona, you just need to unshare your screen.
Okay.
Thank you. And it's actually Charles Gowing. I think that's the next person.
No, I'll be presenting.
Harry. Okay, Harry's the student that did the work. All right.
Okay.
All right, you're able to see that nicely?
Okay, Harry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, hello, my name's Harry, and welcome to my short presentation on our developments in lead-210 dating methodologies. So for those of you who don't know, lead-210 dating is based on the concept that there is a constant supply of radioactive lead-210 being settled on surface layer sediments. As time goes on and these sediments are then buried, the lead-210 is then decays, which then means that when core samples are taken, we can compare the lead-210 activity of a specific layer of a core and compare that to the activity of the entire core in order to determine the age of specific sediment layers. So for those of you who are familiar with lead-210 dating, these calculations will likely be very familiar to you. These are the calculations from the Appleby 2001 paper, which have become kind of the core of lead-210 dating in recent years. So the beginning of this project was at BGS trying to refine our lead-210 dating capabilities by applying these calculations in Excel, an example of which you can see here using the data published in Appleby 2001. Once we were confident in our application of these calculations, we went on to try and apply new methods, where we came across the Plum method, which is a Bayesian statistical method. Sorry. This is based on the R programming language, and all of the information is freely available and open source to anyone who wishes to access it. And this shows a new way of thinking about lead-210 dating and calculating it, and a way of processing the data that allows individual data points to be able to influence each other in order to provide more succinct data. Now, in order to validate our two methodologies that we were looking to apply, we made use of some freely available data from a lake in Finland. This data was unique in that the lake has distinct valves within the cores taken. As you can see here, there are black lines which represent each year that's passed. This allowed us to perform lead-210 dating on the data from the core samples taken in the lake, from the lake, and be able to use our chronologies generated from the lead-210 data and compare that to the valves in order to validate our results. As you can see here, the two methods both performed very well and fell incredibly close to the, I suppose, true dates. But as you can see, a correction needs to be applied in order for the two methodologies to be accurate. This is because in this specific core, the lead-210 data that had been collected hadn't been completed, without which any lead-210 dating method becomes unreliable. At this point, we were able to make use of the cesium-137 activities from the 1963 weapons testing maximum in order to provide a reference age from which we can calibrate the two methodologies. And as you can see, the two calibrated data sets perform far better than the uncalibrated data sets. Looking a little bit more closely at the deviation from the valve dates, we can see that both of the different methods for calculating the age both followed very much the same trend. Due to the fact that, again, they performed very much the same, it's likely that any remaining deviation from the reference ages is more of a result of uncertainty in the analytical measurements of the lead-210 activity rather than errors inherent within the methods themselves. Thank you all very much for listening.
Many thanks to you. Very interesting for this new approach to solve some environmental problems. Chang Seng can start with development with the last.
Okay, thank you thank you. I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces and names. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see it now? Okay, my student Hao Fanxu, has just graduated now, and he's in China. So I make the presentation. The talk will be mainly about GIS, so I'm going to show you quite a lot of maps. First, traditional applications of GIS, of course, is to produce maps of locations, of distributions. So those are the traditional applications. And we are trying to solve a whole range of issues or problems in geochemistry, environmental geochemistry. But now we have a new issue that's the sample number, specifically even for Ireland. Our old data, we got more than 1,000 samples, and the new data called TELUS. You can see the number of samples, just half of the country. Then we have reached nearly 20,000. So the number of samples has significantly increased, or 10 times of that. Then we are really moving into a big data area. This enables us to focus more on local details and to explore hidden patterns and features. So I'm going to explain two topics here, just focus on those two. First one is the hotspot analysis. So when we get a large number of samples, we can use some methodologies. The first one is called LISA, Local Indicator of Spatial Association. Okay, this is the traditional map, okay? We can visually see some patterns, hotspots, some cool spots, some outliers. But with the LISA methodology, we're able to statistically identify them. We can identify the high-value clusters, low-value clusters, high-value outliers, low-value outliers. So that's really helpful. And for example, in the urban area, we may have some bonfires. And when bonfires are burned, we also burn tires. So we get extremely high values of zinc. So you can easily identify those hotspots of zinc in those bonfire sites. And in urban area, in fact, this is rare earth elements in London. And we can see the hotspots and cool spots of rare earth elements. They are very much in line with geology. High values are related to those clay geology. Another interesting finding is the phosphorus in London. So you can see the phosphorus hotspots are mainly located along the river. And also we found the influence of the highest tidal point. Another methodology of hotspot analysis is called Gettys or GI. And this method will give us only hotspots and cool spots without spatial outliers. And in fact, it provides us better visualization. So interestingly, we found something really nice here. Top TOC, organic carbon and pH. Normally they are, they got a negative correlation. But here in Central Eastern Europe, we found both of them are cool spots. That's really interesting. So that's different from the general trend. Then we found something really interesting as coarse glacial deposit. Okay, that's hotspots. Anyway, when we get big data, that's really help us to explore that. Another concept I want to talk about is spatially varying relationship. Now, what does it mean? We have seen such scatter plots very often. For example, here is the relationship between SOC, soil organic carbon, and elevation. So what's their relationship? Are they positive or negative, poor or significant? Quite often we see such gunshots, and the right side, the right-hand graph is showing in a logarithmic scale. Normally we just see it's complicated, okay, finishes there. But obviously we should not stop there. If we have a closer look, we just have a look at Google Earth. From the bottom of the mountain, we get more organic carbon. On the top, we get less. So SOC and elevation, their relationship is negative. If we just even zoom in, zoom out, then we get a lower elevation, we get more organic carbon. Higher elevation, get less. So their relationship is negative. However, if we have a closer look even in Ireland and the UK, and here in Western Galway, we have a blanket piece on the mountains. And at the bottom of the mountains, we get agricultural land. So here, obviously the relationship is positive. And if you go to the mountains, we do see those blanket peat. However, if we move to Central Ireland, Midland area, the peat there are basin peat. Therefore, with the increase of elevation, we will get a lower organic carbon. Then their relationship becomes negative again. So that's very interesting. Just even in such a small country in Ireland, we can find some area positive, some area negative. Obviously, it's related to peat. In blanket peat area could be positive. In basin peat area could be negative. In this case, we can calculate their local correlation coefficient. So those are the local correlation coefficients. So clearly we can show that in the Midland area, we get negative. In other areas, we get positive or not significant. So we can easily link the results with the type of peat. So the conclusion is very clear. The relationship is spatially varying and also in line with the peat type. Okay, anyway, that's just a quick summary. I would like to see with the increased number of data available to us, we are entering the big data area, so we can focus on hotspots analysis and spatially varying relationship. Our thinking or our idea should really shift from global towards local. And we can use local statistics to find more details and use spatial analysis to find more hidden patterns. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we have finished our presentation about the manuscript submitted to the special issue. I think that we can have 5 minutes at all to have any question about our presentation. If there is some questions, please, we can.
Can I make one point? I was going to make it in my introduction. I'm a chemist, basically, and I'm getting more and more concerned with when people are doing multi-element analyses and reporting them, we're still stuck in milligram per kilogram. Now, no chemist would do that. The active thing is molarity, and a gram of lead compared with, say, a gram of arsenic or zinc, very different. We really need to move to reporting as millimoles or micromoles per kilogram if we're going to make a sensible comparison between elements of widely different atomic weights. Leave it like that.
Thanks. Bye. Okay. If there are not any other questions about our presentation, now I think that is the moment to the formal thank to Michael, before that Michael give an overview of the last 2 years. So I want to ask to Sean Seng for the first to give some words about Michael, please.
Okay, I really want to say a big thank you to our outgoing president, Mike Watts. Your leadership has demonstrated to be with great vision and wisdom. Under your leadership, SEGH has made significant progress, moving into a new area. Under your leadership, SEGH constitution has been successfully implemented, and the internationalization of SEGH has been significantly strengthened, with all the 4 regions, including Europe, America, Asia Pacific, and Africa, well developed and activated. More specifically, Africa is well established now, and SEGH is fast growing in this region. During the special period of the pandemic, SEGH has adapted quickly to online events And SEGH annual conferences, branded as SEGH Live, were successfully held. The online events played an important role to keep SEGH community together, especially during the difficult time of the world. I also want to specifically mention that you are actively involved in strengthening the relationship between SEGH Society and SEGH Journal, Environmental Geochemistry Health, which is beneficial to both SEGH and the journal. I want to thank you for your extraordinary leadership and contribution to SEGH. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shaosheng. Please, Paula, can you give some words about it? Or Paula Marino is connected.
I'm speaking for Paula.
Okay.
She can't make it, so she sent me some text.
Okay.
And so I'm going to read it as if I'm Paula. That is Paula Marinho from the University of Minho in Portugal. And she writes, Dear Michael, please accept my apologies for missing this special event. I would have preferred to say this in person, but it's impossible due to a previous engagement. Therefore, I'm going to say it for her. So she's saying, it's a short but sincere message to thank you for the last years. I want to thank you the outstanding effort on your part to maintain the society alive and kicking in such challenging times. Thank you so much for your commitment to making SEGH more active and effective as a society. Thank you for all those meetings at strange hours. Luckily for me, we're in the same time zone. And thank you for all the good moments you've provided for us during the SEGH conferences. Moments to share ideas, make connections, meet new people, and sometimes make new friends. But it's already becoming too long, and I'll conclude by saying it was a job well done. Congratulations, it's been a privilege working with you. Paula.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Ariadne is online and want to take.
Yes, of course. I'm very glad that I am able to be present in this lovely meeting and see all these old and new friends of SEGH. And of course, I would like to thank Michael very much for his very inclusive leadership, I have to say. I want to thank him because he constantly encouraged the involvement of the board members all these years and involvement to the SEGH activities, and his very strong support and motivating leadership towards SEGH and especially towards the early careers initiative of SEGH. I think he was able to build quite a momentum at this time, and I hope and I believe that this will last in the future. And all the best, and I think that Michael will always contribute and have to play a very strong act in the SEGH. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Akinade, please, do you want to introduce some words about Michael?
Yes, of course. And just to follow up on what others have said, I want to actually thank Michael for his leadership. And I want to say this about Michael. I've just said this to him. Michael like taking, he's so trustful of people. Even when he's meeting you for the first time, he has this knack to quickly see whether you can deliver or you cannot deliver. I don't know how he has that, where he got that from, but he has that knack to quickly know whether you'll be able to do what you are promising to do or not. So I want to thank him, especially for the African continent. He has really, really, really helped. Bringing SEGH to Zambia, I'm sure was a risk, but it was a very successful one because everybody actually enjoyed themselves at Livingston. And since Livingston has been very, very supportive of all our initiatives in the African sub-region, and it's been mentoring a lot of the younger ones that we also try to drag along. And you can see it in the numbers of the African now in SEGH. So on behalf of my colleagues here from the continent and from all over the place, I say thank you for your served tenure, and we hope to continue to see you as we leverage on your support and experience moving forward. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah. This is getting uncomfortable.
Michael, we are receiving many messages on the chat for you by the African colleagues. This is very important, I suppose, for your support to this adventure. Okay, I have the last one. Antea Brown want to introduce something, please.
I'm just going to make it really short, Michael, because everybody's said everything pretty well. But I just wanted to say you've been inspiring to work with. And with all the young members and the UCR involvement, you've secured the future of the society, which is marvelous. And you're handing it over in very good shape indeed. Well done and congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you, Antea.
Okay, thank you. Even from my side, Michael, because I was a member board. I became a member board last 2 years, and so for me it was very interesting to have the opportunity to observe your skilled management style firsthand, only by email and online meeting, which I plan to use as a guideline for my society participation. I am thankful to you and to your support for all of us. During my tenure as board member of the society, I appreciate Michael and very distinguished career in environmental chemistry and health-related research, and the motivation, the dynamics, acting as a team leader to support the growth of the society. Last, it's interesting and important to remember that indeed the unprecedented circumstance that have challenged every day of us through the COVID-19 pandemic since early 2020 have changed the organization of the society community. Michael, as president, quickly adapted the online system, conference and meeting just planned that are all recorded and available via web. And this is very important for the young research. Many thanks, Michael. Okay.
Thank you. Great. Thanks very much, everyone, for the comments. I think we'd sent Bob off to sleep there for a moment, so maybe we talk about something else. Very much appreciated those comments. I find it quite uncomfortable, but no, it is appreciated. I'd like to say a few thanks before I just give a little bit of a rundown on progress with the society and hopefully where we're going in the future. Many thanks to Maurizio for the leadership of this initiative for the special issue, and of course Andrew and others for pulling this together, and particularly to the authors who have to actually put pen to paper. It's quite an effort, and of course everyone's doing this around their busy schedule, so it couldn't have happened without all of the contributors that are here today and those that couldn't make it. And very nice to see a mix of the fellows participating and the early career researchers. I mean, for example, I can see Harry at the top right of my screen. He's an undergraduate. He's looking for a PhD this October, by the way. If you've got a PhD project, he's very good. Take him on. And Naswana Kemwamfa, who won a prize back in Zambia in 2018 for a presentation there. So it's nice to see a lot of our early career researchers coming back to us. And also mixing with our fellows who have vast experience that we should perhaps be drawing on ever more so to avoid reinventing the wheel, to make sure we are constantly moving forward. So many thanks to Maurizio for that. Also to the board for the support over the last 4 years. It's much appreciated. I have was constantly aware of pushing people and trying to realize when not to go too far in pushing people and trying to make sure everyone delivers. So hopefully my frustration didn't go too far at times, but most of the time, actually, as I'll go through, we've achieved a lot together in the last 4 years, and particularly thanks to Gillian as the SEGH Secretary for keeping us in order. So thanks very much, Gillian, for your support over the last 4 years, and particularly to Anthea, who really is the engine of SEGH in driving the treasury and the membership. And of course, all of you here from Anthea, everything runs through Anthea. So many thanks to both of you in particular. So what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of a rundown. So if I just share my screen, you'll have seen this paper that was produced by the board recently. We have agreed open access with Springer, so that's good. So anyone can read it. So what you'll see in this paper is a bit of a review of the last 4 years. Back in 2019, we produced a paper as the board to set out some aspirations for the following few years. So that was from 2019. And so this paper here is a little bit of a review of how we got on. And we set out some of those aspirations as sort of improving engagement with health. Now that's always been a bit of a challenge, hasn't it? Having health on the end of the name of our society. And we've got a table at the end of this paper just detailing how many talks we have that are health related. So that might include biomarkers, where biomarkers are mentioned, or epidemiology. So we've got a growing proportion of contributions at conferences, and that includes the online conferences, which have greatly improved our diversity, both geographically and in terms of the science that's presented. But we still have plenty of work to do to try and improve that balance. And I think, as Alex would have said over the years, it's a constant challenge to engage the medics, to try and work with us geochemists. So that's still quite a challenge going forward. We aim to increase the regional membership, to try and improve that geographical diversity. So we have almost 40% of members in Africa, for example. Back in 2018, we followed a catastrophic drop in membership in the Americas and in Asia, as often conferences tend to lead to peaks and troughs in memberships as we lose them. So there's that constant battle to try and provide reasons for, sorry, I've actually realized I've pulled up the wrong paper. Nobody pointed that out. And pulled up Brian's paper. So it's throwing me a bit, isn't it? Anyway, I'll send you the editorial. That was a bit of a cock up, wasn't it? So we had a bit of a loss of membership in the Americas, and we've gradually rebuilt that over the last few years, and we've got a few board members, and we're now bringing on people in Latin America, and largely this has been helped through the online presence that we have. And the SEGH live format that came about really due to the pandemic. It's something we talked about in our 2019 paper, which talked about doing more online type activities. And of course, this accelerated it. And we were very lucky in that we had a number of delegates already planning to go to Kenya in 2020. So we're able to draw on talks there. And we had quite a diverse bunch of people from 35 countries, about 100 people. And we had talks from Mali, which I don't think we've ever had. I think we had contributors from Fiji and so on. So it's quite broad, and we organized that across the time zones. So gradually, as we've embedded this approach, we've had regionally led meetings. So SEGH Asia, for example, led a meeting in December focused on e-waste, and there are a few talks looking at e-waste and biomarkers. So that's quite nice to see. And in September, SEGH Americas also ran a meeting, largely centered around students and early career researchers providing presentations. And of course, Bob Finkelman has set up a series of meetings focused on students, and that was in Latin America in November. So we've picked up about a dozen students in Latin America, and hopefully another couple of board members to beef up our Latin American representation. So that series of student conferences moves to Africa next, and Akinad will lead on the organisation of that student conference. And of course, this is all online, so it's very equitable. The cost of joining these meetings is hardly anything. So anyone can join from anywhere. So I think the equitable nature of accessing SEGH is vastly improved. However, I'm sure we all want to return to in-person conferences. So let's hope the twice postponed Kenya conference can happen in the autumn, although we may have to think of a hybrid future, particularly with responsible travel in mind and you know, the constant need to reduce carbon emissions for travel. So I think we're well placed for a variety of scenarios in the future. So we need to try and still evolve the SEGH goals. So we were aiming to try and improve the relevancy to impact. So that might be linking through to policy. And I think that's always going to be a constant challenge. So that might be through to strategic development goals or likewise. And we have, again, in that table in the paper, we have detailed sort of the number of talks that are coming through. So at least with these goals, we can start to measure how well we are doing on various indicators, and we can try and improve that as time goes by. So if there are some sort of general statements, then at least we have some evidence to either dispel them or back them up. So please do provide new ideas for online meetings. They're very straightforward to set up, and they're really quite engaging. Even in the Americas, they're thinking about short, sharp coffee catch-ups just to make sure the networking side of things is still happening. And of course, this is very difficult, isn't it? If you have a conference in this format, you can't just have a conversation over coffee or over a beer. So it might be that we need to switch to more sort of social interaction via this format, perhaps, just to try and fulfill that sort of missing gap. And we'd encourage the early career researchers really challenge the board and present new ideas and initiatives that we could be running. I mean, currently we have a series of writing workshops for African early career researchers. So we have just over 50 people registered for that. And there certainly seems to be a demand from that group for training in measurement of uncertainty. And I'm sure there are skills required for spatial representation and so on, or learning R, and given that a lot of software is open source now, this should be much easier. I'll just sort of take to task maybe our focus on metals, perhaps that Brian mentioned. I think we do have greater diversity of focus on various analytes, whether that's a wide range of elements. So it's not just your metals. There have been a lot of presentations focusing on micronutrients and the pathways that might exist, say, between soil crops to human consumption or animal health. And we have had a number of talks. As really, I suppose, the step change was in Brussels in 2016 when we started to see a lot more around sort of pharmaceuticals in the environments and organic compounds that really, rather than just being sparsely populated around the conferences, they really seem to grow into quite a hub of talks. So I think that is happening. And of course, a lot of data is quickly generated these days with instruments. It's almost so easy. The students don't know how lucky they are. The challenge is, what do you do with all of that data now? So there's a lot of emphasis on the spatial representation, the statistics, but I'm still seeing in papers people forgetting about how to ensure and provide the confidence in their measured data. So we mustn't forget that. And of course, when we go to measured data, there are constantly developments in how we measure an analyte in the environment, whether that's speciation or isotope ratios for source apportionment or toxicity mobility studies. So it's very exciting that there are constantly technological developments and unfortunately always the need for these kinds of studies, but that keeps us in work, doesn't it? And gives a reason for these kind of societies. We're seeing developments such as ionomics, which was quite a topic for the SEGH Americas talks, which is sort of like full systems analyses. This isn't quite translating through to the journal, Environmental Geochemistry and Health. Of course, we've seen a lot of it in the conferences, but it may well start to trickle through as it takes a while for papers to be written. With EGH, it's certainly showing great success. I had a meeting with Ming Wong yesterday in Springer, and they were hitting about 1,100, 1,200 paper submissions over the last 2 years. I mean, clearly people haven't got a lot to do at home in the last couple of years, so they've been writing papers. But that's risen from about 350 submissions in 2014, and the rejection rate is about 30% throughout the whole of that period. But the impact factor's gone up from about 2 to about 4.6 in 2020, so we should hear what the new impact factor is next year. But that does often mirror the rise in other journals, so we need to just take that within the general context. It is a constant battle to try and engage with the journal. It is our huge resource to us that's often being used by other societies. So we do need to engage with helping Ming, and the suggestion has been that we may have some additional editor-in-chiefs that may cover specialized topics. So that might be one way of supporting Ming, because he's actually handling all of the papers. So 1,100 papers are passing his desk. That's just phenomenal. So we owe a huge debt of gratitude to Ming for the success in that journal. But it isn't sustainable for him to keep doing that. So we do need some volunteers to help him. And we need to refresh the associate editors so that we are turning these papers over quickly, so that the demands for quicker turnarounds are ever greater from the authors. So that's just one last thing with the journal. So have a look at the paper. I will quickly find the correct link to the website. Clearly, I had the wrong paper on the screen. I should have seen that half an hour ago. But hopefully, we can continue this success that we've built some momentum, and we have quite a lot of energy within each of the regions now to carry us forward. And hopefully we can build that sort of critical mass to carry us forward. So I'm very proud to have served for 2 terms, and I thank you for allowing me to do that. And I'm very pleased that we have a new president voted, and in particular from Africa. So when we first set up the African section in 2018 at the Zambia conference, Akinad was at that point, along with Adipo Asano and a couple of others, but in particular, the 2 of them have been the energy behind growing the African section, and that seems to be where a lot of the excitement has come from in the last few years. And that enthusiasm and excitement seems to be spreading to other regions, as we've been seeing recently in Asia and the Americas. I think they're ordering their dinner, Alexandros, aren't they? So I would like to congratulate Akinad Olatunji from the University of Ibadan in Nigeria for being voted as the next president. And I'd like to welcome him, and I will support you. And we've had some chats already, haven't we, about handing over and what you need to look out for. And so perhaps you'd like to say a few words, and good luck.
Yeah, thank you, Michael, for that. And I want to convey my gratitude to every members of the SEGH for their confidence, for their trust, for supporting my candidature. It's been overwhelming. The support has been quite overwhelming. I'm extremely excited to get the support of what we normally in Africa refer to as our living ancestors, those who are the fellows group in the society. It's been very heartwarming that we can lean on that support. And above all, there's a foundation that has been laid for the future of the SEGH. The document has been, the vision document has been thoroughly discussed, planned, and I'm sure if we continue to execute the strategy document has been put together, SEGH will get better for it. I know quite a lot of us will be called upon as we move forward to do one task or the other. I want to please seek your understanding. I'm going to be as pushful as Michael, if not more pushful than Michael. And please, well, it's just for the good of the society and to be able to actually move the SEGH to the next level. One thing that Michael has done very successfully, which I would like to build upon, is which Charles mentioned, was the linkage of the SEGH with other society. That relationship will build upon it and ensure that we continue to reach out to a fellow society that has similar ideas and similar vision to actually grow the science of environmental geochemistry and health. And above all, the energy of the ECRs will be tapped into to continue to see how we can leverage on the young ones to move the SEGH to the next level. This is not a time to talk. The time to work will come and the meals will start flying. And of course, I'm sure somebody talking about meeting at odd hours the other time. I hope we'll not continue the meetings in odd hours. Funny enough, Africa and the UK seems to be on the similar time zone. So if we're going to call meeting, look like the hot hour meetings will continue if that's what is actually suitable for everybody. But above all, I'm sure that we can lean on your support and really move the society to greater height and achieve much more for our society. So thank you once more for your support and for your trust, because this is a huge trust that you are putting in my ability. And as I said, it's going to be a teamwork. It's not an individual thing. It's just someone to just hold the steering while others provide the support while we move forward. So thank you very much as we move on. Back to you, Michael.
Okay, well, good luck. I think you've heard enough from me. So Maurizio, would you like to round off the meeting?
Okay. Many thanks to all. Many thanks, Michael, and welcome to Working Others for a new president. And I remain available to work with you. Okay. Many thanks. We know we're just in time for 20 minutes now, but it's enjoy for this meeting. Many thanks to all of us, okay? See you next meeting, and we're waiting for new message from new president.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Goodbye. Ciao.
Bye-bye. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Take care, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.